Welcome to Fringe Element here on the 440 Sports Network. My name is Braden Gall, and you can follow me on Twitter at Braden Gall.
Mine's Erin Dugan. You can follow me on Twitter at @Erin or Instagram Erin_Dugan.
State of the Union for the Texas A&M Aggies coming up a little bit later on with the one and only Billy Liucci of TexAgs.com. Long conversation with him about the state of the Texas A&M roster, what he thinks about how good this roster could be, the quarterback battle. Tried to give us some insight into who Jimbo Fisher is out of press conference settings and coaching football and all that stuff. But also a lot about Texas A&M's, blossoming rivalry, as we've talked a lot about on the show, Erin, with LSU. And so we're going to talk a lot about rivalries today on the show. You and I had a bit of a rivalry incident, if you want to call it that, this weekend, or occurrence. I don't know what to call it, between Vanderbilt and Tennessee baseball. But I thought we would define rivalry in college athletics, in particular football, because Vandy fans don't seem to think that the Tennessee Vandy thing is a rivalry. Tennessee fans certainly do. So I thought, you know what, Erin, we got a podcast for SEC sports fans. I figured we could define what a rivalry is supposed to be on the show today.
We both love baseball, so it's a treat.
It is. And it was a treat this weekend. The weather was gorgeous, by the way. So we're going to get into that as well today. We'll touch on the national championship game. LSU fans, I'm curious how LSU fans were watching the national championship game on Monday evening, considering their coach just got fired. So a lot of fun stuff on the show today for all of you out there. Please rate, review, subscribe, go to the YouTube page. Make sure you're clicking all the buttons that we're asking you to there on the socials and across all the different places we ask you to do that. We really appreciate your support. And of course, Erin Dugan, before we get into any of this, Fringe Element is brought to you by the wonderful folks at
Jasper's, your Final Four hub for watching the Final Four, as well as eating during the Final Four and socializing with friends during the Final Four / championship. And that is what you call a concise ad spot / slogan, if you will.
There's a lot of fours in there, a lot of Fs, a lot of fours going on. There.
It's going to be a struggle the whole episode, not necessarily with the Fs, but the fact that the hardest word in the English language for me to say is rivalry.
That was pretty good.
Thank you. But I was thinking about it and I was ready for it.
Want to know.
We'll struggle through this.
Yep. Want to know. Jasper's, of course, is the next evolution of the sports bar over there on West End in Nashville. So if you're coming to Nashville, we know a lot of you guys listen outside of Nashville. And if you're coming to Nashville, make sure you check out Jasper's. Four Top Hospitality is who owns Jasper's. They have 13 locations across the Southeast. So if you're in Jackson, Mississippi, Huntsville, Alabama, they've got a location for you, a place called Saltine down in Jackson. You got Amerigo's all through Mississippi as well. You got a Char, which is a fantastic steakhouse.
In Memphis as well.
Yep, they got one in Memphis and Huntsville and Jackson. So, Four Top Hospitality taking care of you SEC fans across the region. Okay, so we'll get to Billy Liucci a little bit later on, and we'll define what makes a rivalry great. Because I disagree with a lot of Vandy people these days about their baseball program. But
shocking.
We'll talk about the football side of things, because I think there are a lot of really exciting and really fun developing and new and soon to be new rivalries in the SEC. And Texas and Oklahoma are part of that. So I think there's a lot of interesting things that are happening in this conference as it pertains to rivalry, but we need to define it. However, I think congratulations to Kansas on the national championship on Monday evening over North Carolina. The game was exceptional, Erin. I had a great time watching the game. It was fantastic drama. Not a single word from Jim Nantz and anybody else on the broadcast crew about the 5 level 1 violations that the NCAA is currently investigating Kansas for. Yep. I'm assuming LSU fans and Will Wade are very curious about why that sort of happened and took place. But I just wanted to get your thoughts, Erin. Do you care? Because I know you're on the athlete side of getting paid, as most people are, but I'm just curious, are you willing to sort of just forget the NCAA stuff if it's a thoroughly entertaining product? Like if Georgia plays this great championship game against Alabama and they're under investigation by the NCAA, like Auburn with Cam Newton, let's say in 2010, Auburn fans don't give a shit that happened 3 weeks earlier in the season. What do you make of the dynamic of a violation in the NCAA mixed with the championship and the game and all that stuff? How does that all land on you?
Well, I do care because I guess thinking about the student athletes, but in a different way, because these things take so long to pan out and you don't want to talk about them on the broadcast in the current year, because I guess it leaves a taste in people's mouth or taints the moment or whatever the reasoning is for that, because there's strategy involved in the broadcasters, color commentator, play-by-play being asked not to say something, or else it would have organically come up because it's very relevant. The problem with it is how it affects the future athletes. I'm seeing that play out in Memphis right now. Obviously, I'm a Memphis fan, but just things coming down, transgressions from years past, now affecting current student athletes. So that's why I care, is because even though we're not talking about it right now for this team and they're going to be able to have their moment, you're going to see all of these sanctions and punishments actually come into fruition for a whole class of student athletes that doesn't deserve them at all. So that's why I care. I don't know how you solve it either, because it doesn't seem to be money, because people will risk it for the biscuit, if you will, to just make violations and then just be like, okay, well, we'll have a donor pay them off if we get caught. Not saying that's how their brain's working, but money doesn't seem to be solving the problem. So I guess you do have to punish them. It just sucks that it ends up being student athletes that weren't even there during the sanctions. And a lot of times student athletes don't even have anything to do with the sanctions at all, current or future.
Right. Like if 4 years later, all of a sudden the NCAA is like, yeah, Georgia did a bunch of this for that national championship team that won the title. Well, none of the players that quote unquote were, I'm using the phrase guilty here, but it's all hypothetical. You know what I mean? Then all the players that would have like, oh, you're not going to a bowl game or whatever, let's say. Yeah. But that doesn't help. That doesn't solve the problem of the people that already have the championship rings and already have the banners. And like, sure, you can vacate wings on Wikipedia, but like, who cares? Like, it doesn't. Auburn fans know exactly what happened in 2010. If anybody came back and took that away, they don't care. Like, no one's going to care. I'm good at compartmentalizing. I can watch the game and I can say, man, that was an extraordinary basketball game. I also kind of think that they should get paid by the shoe companies if they want to be paid by the shoe companies or whatever, but I also know the rules are in place for a reason and we're not supposed to break the rules. Even if I disagree with the rules, like there's lots of roads in Nashville that I think are stupidly slow and the speed limit should be higher. It doesn't mean I can just,
you're not going to get pulled over.
Right. Like so I'm so torn on this because and this is what I don't like about the internet. The internet's just like the extremes, Like on Twitter after the game on Monday night, it was just like, are we just going to ignore the fact that these guys are all a bunch of cheaters? And then over here, it's just like, what a brilliant one shining moment for Kansas. The bookending a Hall of Fame career for Bill Self and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, isn't it both? Like, can it be both?
I think it has to be both. I don't think there's really another answer for that. There needs to be a better answer for how things are handled, but there's not really a better answer for in that moment. As sports fans, or just even March Madness even goes beyond that. It's outside of the normal, diehard sports fans. It kind of touches everybody just for bracket and excitement and Cinderella stories and everything. So it doesn't mean people aren't going to watch and enjoy it, as I think they should. But, I just thinking about those things coming down the pipeline later and affecting kids in the future that have decided Kansas is the best spot for them. That makes me sad.
Well, what if, like, this is the LSU question then, because LSU fans obviously listen to the show. Kansas fans don't. But like LSU fans, what I always found interesting about LSU was like they knew all the stuff that had happened and they just kept Will Wade employed. And so I think that one's a little different. Like we caught him on tape, right? like we caught him with the hand in the cookie jar and then they just like decided to ignore it. LSU was like, no, we're just going to keep him. And while I don't really care that kid on the end of that phone call, like got a little money to go play basketball at LSU, like I personally don't think that's amoral. It is technically against the rule. So I'm like, I don't know how you keep Will Wade employed. Then they get their notice of allegation. Then they finally act to fire him. In the meantime, Bill Self is sort of a part of the same investigation, different, but the same. And like, he's just winning a championship. Yep. So I'm assuming LSU fans had a weird night on Monday night.
Had to have. Yeah. I mean, weird all around.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I'm with you. There's no way to sort of truly like punish the right people, the right amount for the right crime and like have it all work out without it like there being a bunch of shrapnel that affects other people.
It's just scare tactics of the future. Yeah, and it's like, I mean, I guarantee you that the biggest concern, I'm not saying all universities, but the biggest concern normally is, are you going to keep me out of future postseason play? And therefore you're going to keep me away from potential revenue from TV networks, from everything else, and from donors that are excited about the, forward progress of the program. It's not necessarily, oh, I'm sad that, Johnny Two Star, that's your go-to name. Not really relevant here, but it's the first thing I can think of. It's not really our problem that Braden Gall committed to Kansas, and now he's not going to get the playing time. He's going to end up in the transfer portal because we're under all these allegations like that. I don't feel like that's on the forefront of people's minds. Which I wish it was.
No, I agree with you. That's a lot of like connecting dots that need to be done ahead of time before this stuff happens, but it happens. So, all right, let's get into some rivalry talk here. So I want to get into some of I think there are blossoming rivalries across the SEC that are new and fun. A lot of them involve Lane Kiffin, and that's fine. And there's A&M and LSU, which is probably my favorite one of all right now. And we talked a lot about this during the regular season, but we're going to talk about it a little bit more with Billy Liucci coming up a little bit later on. But I want to define a rivalry first, because Vandy and Tennessee played baseball this weekend.
They did.
Tennessee whipped that ass, but Vandy is the best program in all of college baseball for the better part of 15 years. They are the Alabama of college baseball. Mm-hmm. And what I find fascinating, and what I think, and this is sort of how I would define a rivalry, I don't think you need two sides to be great. Like, ask Auburn.
Of the rivalry, you mean?
Yeah, like Alabama has dominated Auburn under Nick Saban, right? Ohio State has dominated Michigan. I think it's helpful if both sides are very good. I think it's helpful if games are really big and there's a lot of gravity in those situations. But I don't think that is what necessarily drives like the deeply rooted connected tissue of a rivalry. I think it is the fact that Auburn and Alabama are in the same state, that they all live next to each other, go to the same church together, work in the same offices together, go to the same schools together, have known each other for generations of families. And I think that is what makes Vandy Tennessee baseball good, is not because Vandy's been way better than Tennessee, because there's no argument there. It is that there is a socioeconomic cultural identity issue between Vanderbilt and Tennessee.
That's one of them. Keep going.
Vanderbilt is the James Bond tuxedo wearing, martini drinking, coolest guy at the party who has been at this party for 15 years, has multiple rings to show for it, because they are the best and they know how to act because they've been there before. And this is how we play the game. Tennessee is like a Chevy Z71 1996 with like a keg of Natty Light, a bunch of drunken rednecks who've kicked in the back door of the party and have no idea where they are. They just showed up to the party, like mullet luging their way into this like really hotty toddy, nice, fancy party. And both of them represent their institutions culturally, and they play the game the way both fan bases, and like, this is long-winded here,
I'm following you totally.
But I'll land the plane here, because Tennessee plays the game the way a bunch of drunken rednecks would play the game, and they love that about themselves, and they're good because of it. Vandy is black tie, pinkies up, and is very good at the game, and they love themselves because of their style, and then they hate the other one because of that exact cultural identity. And, oh, by the way, we live on the same streets and have the same families and do all the same stuff that Auburn and Alabama does. I think the tissue, the connected, layered tissue, is what makes a great rivalry. I don't know. That's my stance on it.
No, I think that all rings true, except for I don't think Tennessee's good because of that. I think it's really fun for them. They're like that and they play like that, and it's really fun. I don't think they're good because of that. In fact, you have to be really, really good to play that kind of rowdy, boisterous, like fun, just sort of
wearing fur coats in the dugout.
Yeah. I mean, you have to be, honestly, because there's a little bit, I won't call it chaos, because the program's figured it out at this point and Tony's doing a great job, but it is also really hard. You're up and down. So, which is a really hard thing. You have to be really good to be able to play like that and still win, because you're not always back in the middle. They're like, you know how Coach Corbin is. He's just right. You don't ever get too high. You don't ever get too low. You stay right there. We don't react. We don't yell. Our guys don't yell at the umps. Corbin will get in an ump's face and talk very sternly, but he will not yell and scream and act like he's going to pounce on them. So I'd say the fact that Tennessee can play like that and still be that good, to me, I guess being around Vanderbilt seems hard, because I feel like there's a lot of up and down emotionally.
I do think it feeds why they're good, though. Like the fact, because like they play in a tiny little ballpark where you can hit home runs, and like they're brash. They're outspoken. They enjoy and relish the role of being the villain. Like they're fine with being the villain. Like they want to be the villain. Yeah, go ahead, check my bat. Oh, I cheated. Okay, who cares? I'm gonna hit another dinger 3 innings later. Like they sort of love that. Like they're the bad guy.
It works because they're good, though.
They're very. You're right. And
because if you're bad and you play like that, everyone's like, you're an effing joke.
It's the Lane Kiffin. Like Lane Kiffin can act like Lane Kiffin because he's good.
Right. Exactly.
Like you can act like that if you're good. If
Egos
you're not good,
are fine if you can back it up, essentially.
Yes.
And they can right now.
Tennessee and Vanderbilt, both of them are very good. There's no question about it. Like I went on Sunday. That's 2 of the better baseball teams in America. Like, and the crowd was great. The weather was beautiful. It's a phenomenal, but I think what makes Auburn and Alabama football special, Texas and Texas A&M. Like when I lived in Austin, growing up in middle school, like we learned Aggie jokes. Like that was what you were taught.
Living in the same neighborhoods. It's like having to be at each other's, have the opportunity to be at each other's throat every day. You're in the same class. Your friends are going to come bragging if Auburn wins the next day. You dread it. You almost can't even think about it. That's what a rivalry is to me. One of the things is not even being able to think about have the thought of losing, because it's going to seriously affect the quality of your life for who knows how long, because you're going to have so much shit talking when you go to work, go to school. It's almost like, just don't even say that, because I can't even process being South Carolina and losing to Clemson or vice versa, because I'm just going to have to deal with it every single day.
Like I don't talk a lot of trash about my institution to almost anybody, really, because I just am not. It doesn't do that to me anymore. But the thing that I will, and this is where I'd like to hear your input, because we got to move on to the football rivalries, but I do want you, because you're a big baseball fan, and I want to know what you think about this, because literally the only people I like tweaked a little bit about Tennessee sweeping Vanderbilt this weekend are like my in-laws, are like my closest possible people, where like I've got close family friends or people that are like older generations. And I go, sounds a lot like a guy who just got swept this weekend, when they start making excuses about, and this is what I want you to comment on. Their one big thing is, well, now you care about baseball, Tennessee. And there's more, the Tennessee Vandy thing. There's plenty of football history there, but it's been very one-sided. Basketball has been pretty even.
Yeah.
And baseball has been very uneven towards Vanderbilt over the last 15 years. And I don't think you need to like Kentucky football is good now. Right.
Right.
I don't think Tennessee fans or Florida fans or LSU fans, who are all like quote unquote football people, right? I don't think they can look at Kentucky and be like, oh, now you care about football. Like, I don't think if you're good at something, you can brag about it.
Totally. I completely agree with that. And I think that you made a point that I wanted to go back to. Hold on. I got it.
Must have been riveting.
It was. I mean, just could never forget it, except I did. The caring about baseball thing, obviously you care when you're good, like you just said, but I do, in terms of the evenness of the rivalry or lack of needing to be even, I agree, because I think when you have one of the best teams in the country, like Vanderbilt, as long as there is a chance for defeat, which baseball, you have that chance a lot. I mean, Vanderbilt can play Alabama a million times in football, and you just don't know what's going to happen. Baseball is so situational. It's so day to day.
You mean you do know what's going to happen?
Sorry, you do know what's going to happen.
No,
exactly
you're right.
What's going to happen. With baseball, it's just a little bit different, unless there's a larger gap than we're used to seeing. Like I know you have to win 2 out of 3 in conference series. So that makes it a little bit more likely to actually swing in the favor of the better team, but you just never know. So when you have a team, and Tim Corbin will be the first to say this and has said it many times, is there's almost an inherent rivalry when you get the best of everybody. So when you're at the very, very top of a conference, or you're the epitome of what it looks like to be a standout in this particular sport, which is Vanderbilt and baseball, then you get everybody's best. You get all the strategy, you get extra hours in terms of what you're doing and playbook and, whatever you want to call it. And so you actually get everyone's best. So I don't think that requires it having a history of it being close. It's just everybody wants to take that away from the number one team. Yeah, and you're 100% correct about the cultural difference. Mississippi State Vanderbilt is a perfect example of that. And I'll go back to being a fan of Vanderbilt because it's obvious, but I try to stay neutral sometimes. Mississippi State, I cannot stand Mississippi State in baseball. They have no class. They're wild. They are unnecessarily egotistical, which I will say Tennessee, I don't think their ego turns on or hasn't recently. I mean,
isn't that all the same stuff you could say about Tennessee right now?
They're just not as obnoxious. Well, they're just not as obnoxious as Mississippi State. Like maybe it's just this inherent hate that I have for only their baseball program though.
Now let me ask you this. So this is fascinating to me because I'm a Tennessee alumni and I think Tennessee's more obnoxious than Mississippi State. So I'm curious, is it because
they didn't have your bag packed for the College World Series in 2018 and have to go home and unpack it all because Mississippi State knocked you out on a bottom of the 9th walk-off homer to send you home? I think that was Game 3 of the Super Regional in 2018. It was horrible.
Yeah, that hurt. That hurts just hearing you say it out loud.
And it's just, they're just so obnoxious. And they're everything Vanderbilt's not. They're cocky. They're a farm loud, school. No. So it is. So this raises a great question though about rivalries, which is, can you be anti one sport and not the others? Is that what you're going to say?
Well, that's a phenomenal question too.
My brother and I argued about this earlier.
So you're fine. You don't have any problem with Mike Leach and Mississippi State football. It's just the baseball team.
I mean, I don't really want to hear their cowbells, but they don't want to hear the Vanderbilt Whistler. Right. And so, whatever. Oh, God. Vanderbilt, Jesus Christ. I know. I don't even hear it anymore. So it doesn't bother me because
I sat 3 rows in front of him with our former boss at the game on Sunday and he didn't, Mitch Light. And he didn't. He didn't really bother me much because he was only doing it on 2 strikes in the 2 outs, 2 strikes. And he wasn't doing it much, but it is hilarious how big of a brand this guy has now nationally it's because Vanderbilt baseball is so good that they're on the national stage so often that we're hearing him. So you think it's okay to hate a specific, because if I was going to put my fan hat on.
Okay. Your daddy hat.
God, please don't say that ever again to me.
I don't want you to ever wear one.
So Kentucky and Tennessee have a really interesting rivalry to me. Some of it is tied to geography because, and if, for those of you listening in Arkansas, or Texas, or Georgia that don't understand this, I think this will be illuminating, and I'm curious if it exists anywhere else in the SEC. But there are a lot of people that wear orange in the fall and blue in the spring, and that fucking pisses me off. I am visibly angry right now at people that do that because you're picking the best one in football and the best one in basketball. And I think that's a joke. I think that's sacrilege and flies in the face of being a fan.
Well, that definitely does.
So that's way worse than what you're saying. But what I think is fascinating, and I'll try to be a fan here, which is I love Kentucky football. I've said it on the show 1,000 times.
You love it as a member of the media because you like what they've been able to do. You're not a Kentucky fanboy. No,
not at all. But I really enjoy Mark Stoops. I think he's a great coach. I enjoy how they've built their program. I think it's very smart. I think the coaching staff is good. I love watching their players. I really enjoy the guys they develop. I think they're really good football players. I just think Kentucky is now leveled up to Tennessee in football. Tennessee is leveled up in basketball to match with Kentucky. And there is nothing that gets me more viscerally.
Oh, that's your word. Mine's rivalry. Yours is viscerally.
I don't think viscerally should be used. I think it should just be visceral. But
that's just because you can't say it.
I know. Viscerally. Then the Kentucky blue and the Tennessee orange on a basketball court does nothing to me in football. I don't feel anything when I watch them in football because I like Kentucky football. But Kentucky basketball and Tennessee basketball, like nothing gets me all hot and bothered than when I watch those two. And I'm curious if there's other things like that and Billy Liucci is going to talk about this, like LSU and A&M. We talked about this in the fall with Godfrey when he was when LSU got smoked by Kentucky in football.
Yeah, and he always talks about the highway. What is that?
I-10. It's the I-10. Yeah, it's the I-10 rivalry.
Godfrey's arts. He's always like the I-10, the tension
Billy,
on I-10.
Exactly. And Liucci will go into some more details about like historical context and a lot of it is baseball driven. LSU and A&M have a lot of baseball history. It's not just the modern football and 7 overtimes and, the AD trying to steal Jimbo Fisher. And like, there is lots of that. There is all of that too, but there's some baseball stuff there. So I'm just okay, I know we're bouncing around here, but
no, that's okay. This is good.
When Mark Richt sends his guys out onto the field of the cocktail party to intentionally draw a penalty against the Florida Gators, like those teams could have been 0-11. And that would have been brilliant. Mm-hmm. It would have been brilliant. And it's about the hatred and the tension and sure, it's better if everybody's great. But really what makes like Mississippi and Mississippi State could play every single weekend and be 0-0 in any sport. And I would watch it because I know how much those people hate each other. Because
they're in the same classrooms, in the same offices, having your in-laws are Mississippi State fans and you were raised a rebel land shark. I mean, it's just one of those situations. But let's go back really quick before we move on to my brother and I were arguing about this. So I was talking about what we're going to talk about on the podcast today, just rivalries in general. I was like, yeah, I absolutely despise Mississippi State baseball, but whatever, in basketball. He's like, well, you can't do that. He's like, you're either like, you hate all of it. And my brother ended up going to Tennessee, but we were raised Memphis fans. You
guys are super twisted.
Yeah. Mentally. And I went to Vanderbilt. It's all over the place, but I think I talked about on the very first episode that the first time I ever saw my dad cry was when Memphis beat Tennessee in 1998. And it was happy tears, whatever. So my brother was raised to hate Orange and he hated all of it. And then he ended up going to Tennessee, and obviously that created some confusion. But as a general rule, he's like, how do you hate? He's like, I hate Kentucky, period. No question about it. Being a Memphis fan, Calipari, whatever, he just has hated Kentucky. I'm like, I don't necessarily feel like that. I feel way stronger towards one sport than the other. Like Texas A&M football, great culture. They love to have you, probably me, because we're Vandy fans, or I was a Vandy fan when I went, and they're like, come on down, eat some food. We know you're a check off W in our book. This is great. But I have heard that A&M football fans are like that in general. They love people coming in, 12th man, being a part of their culture, seeing what they have to offer. And obviously the tension would be higher if they're playing someone like Alabama, but in general, they're very welcoming. Texas A&M baseball, one of the scariest experiences I've ever had. Wild. Like it was like a cult. Yes. Oh my gosh. We walked it. Like it reminds me of
Bluebell Park. Yeah.
They play the riflemen after every time they get a strikeout. If you get a ball, they keep track the whole time. So they're like ball four, and do that the whole rest of the game.
That's tremendous.
They know all the pitchers' parents' first names.
Wow.
So they'll be like, Kumar, how's Tracy? And just keep, and they just say it in this stupid voice. Like, I don't even know how to describe it, but it was, it reminds me of the clock in Shrek that pops up and they're like, welcome to Duloc. It's a perfect town. It reminds me of a freaking cult in a Shrek clock. It's the scariest thing I've ever seen. And I'm going to say one more thing before we move on, because I know I'm ranting. We were walking out of the park after we had lost at Texas A&M on, I think, Saturday game. This little girl, tiny, she's probably Marin's age, maybe a little younger. Braden's oldest daughter, who's what, 4, 5?
Yep.
This girl's probably 4. And she is holding her mom's hand and she's like looking up at her, and I'm walking behind her. She's like, Mom, I'm so glad the Aggies won. And her mom, in a Stepford wife voice, I kid you not, I'm not doing this for comedic effect, said, of course, honey, it's always a good day when the Aggies win. And she goes, Mom, is it a good day when the Aggies don't win? And her mom literally looked down at her and jerked her hand and goes, come on, and didn't answer the question.
Wow. Do you think they were doing it all on show for you?
No, I don't think they were paying attention.
Oh, you just heard him. Okay, you just heard him talking. Okay, that is fascinating. By the way,
you need to go if you have not been to a game there. You need to.
No, that's utterly fascinating.
Have a couple drinks and then go, because it's supposed to be the exact opposite of Texas A&M football.
Well,
Wild.
And there are so many amazing baseball stadiums in this league, just like there are football stadiums, and the fans are spectacular. And I just find you're right, though. The dynamics between the sports are really interesting to kind of see how your brain reacts to all of them. And through all of these conversations, like, first of all, LSU A&M is by far one of my, if I'm looking ahead 10 years, what do I think is going to be? Because again, it's only at its best when they both are very good. And Liucci will allude to this. Like, they haven't really played like an SEC West championship style game yet. Right. But if LSU and A&M ever played on the final weekend of the year for an SEC West divisional title, that shit would be crazy. That would be an unbelievable game to go to as a neutral observer. Like, that would just be an unbelievable game to be at. And so you do need that to sort of like kick it up to the next level. Like, that's why the kick six was so big, right? Like, it was the winner was going to win the division and go on to a championship and all that stuff. But what I'm fascinated by when we talk through all of these different dynamics, regionality and proximity and all, like, Texas and Oklahoma are going to come into the league and they're going to bring a lot of history with them. Like, Texas has got rivalries with A&M. Texas has a great history and deep tie to Arkansas. That is going to be a great future rivalry in the SEC. Like, Oklahoma's got some ties to, I guess, Missouri and A&M. But like, really, the thing that I think of when we talk about this is like, well, what's Missouri and South Carolina going to do? Like, because they don't even have, like, again, Missouri's got a little bit of Oklahoma history. They played in the Big 12 championship game in 2007. And, South Carolina's got Clemson in the ACC. But like, South Carolina and Missouri don't really have that thing that they can like sink their teeth into.
No, I feel like sometimes when you're in a situation like that as a program, it's sad when the most exciting thing means beating someone that you shouldn't towards the end of the season and keeping them from going where they should go in the postseason. Right. It's like not a great thing. It's not good to feed off of the negative, but sometimes you don't have a choice, which is kind of the situation they've been in lately.
Well, and but it also goes to our point about geography. Like, Missouri, this is why Kansas and Missouri, right? Like, Kansas and Missouri are such a big rivalry that's called the Border War because they're so close to each other. And they were great when they were in the same conference together, and they were both very good basketball programs. And so that all made sense. Like, I could see Missouri, and this is why I think Missouri belongs in the Big Ten. Like, they are a Big Ten school in my mind, culturally, from an identity standpoint. Like, but their rivalries would be great with other Big Ten West teams. Yes. If they were in there with like Illinois and, Purdue and Nebraska and Iowa, like those would be good rivalries.
Yeah.
Like, South Carolina is a little bit better because South Carolina and Florida have a lot of ties. South Carolina and Tennessee have some rivalry stuff, and they've been in the league for long enough now that it feels like they're kind of a clearly an SEC school.
Yes.
But man, like, what makes this stuff so great is that like on my street, I have Tennessee graduates and Vanderbilt graduates, and like, they don't like each other right now. I've never seen more people comment on a Tennessee hat than after this weekend. Like, people are paying attention to Tennessee baseball and Vanderbilt baseball as a rivalry.
Wait, Braden, vamp for a second.
Okay. All right.
Keep going.
What is Erin going to show up with when she comes back? What is she going to show up with? No, Liucci's going to talk about this. I think Tennessee-Kentucky is a blossoming football rivalry. I think Lane Kiffin versus everybody is sort of, and again, Liucci will talk about this as well in just a second, but Kiffin versus Texas A&M is going to turn into a really interesting rivalry because there's some history there. DJ Durkin just left from Ole Miss to go to Texas A&M. I think that's an interesting one. Nick Saban versus some assistants is an interesting one as well. I wonder if LSU and Florida develops into a bigger rivalry. It's already one, but because Billy Napier was in Louisiana and maybe had some ties and maybe did or didn't want the LSU job, and now he's ended up at Florida. I wonder if there's something there as well. So the other question is, who's going to be Oklahoma's biggest football rival? And they've played Florida in bowl games and in national title games. So there could easily be some Oklahoma-Florida dynamics there as well. But other than Texas,
took longer than I wanted it to. What are you talking about?
I'm just talking about rivalries. Welcome back to the show.
I just want to remind you that.
Wait. Hang on. You need to go to YouTube for this, folks. You need to go to YouTube because I have a feeling I know what she's about to do. And you need to turn all the lights down, get some mirrors out.
Get what out?
Get some mirrors out. Because I have a feeling this is going to be shiny.
Don't forget.
Wow, look at that.
You knew it too. Look at this shit.
Look at that.
Even says Dugan on it.
It's got your name on it?
Yeah.
Is that 2014?
No, this is 2019.
2019? Show us the top. How many diamonds you got there? She's holding up a national championship ring, folks. National championship ring.
Legacy team because we won the SEC championship.
Wow.
Also, lots
of. How much is that? Honestly, honest question. How much is that worth? I
have no clue.
Really?
Truly have no idea. I did not pay for it, obviously.
We should get it appraised. See how much it's worth. I was busy vamping on like what who's Oklahoma's football rival, and you just show up with a freaking championship ring.
It's like, ow.
Please subscribe to the YouTube page because this is the kind of stuff you get on the YouTube page.
Yep. There you go. I'm gonna wear this.
Hold it up all the way. Hold it up all the way to the camera. Let me see that thing. My God.
I love that it says Dugan. It's my favorite thing.
Well, of course, it's got your name on it.
Yeah.
That's pretty dope, dude. Not gonna lie.
I can't get married because this or can't change my last name if I do get married because I don't want it to make my ring go out of style.
Oh man. When you get engaged, if and when anyone decides to do that, well, you have to like
yeah, for sure.
You need to put them like side by side to take the photo and like tweet out the photo when you announce it on your announcement. You're like, which one? Which one?
I love it. It's so small. It's so cute and quaint compared to my other one.
I just want to let you know I hate bachelorette parties. I hate them so much. All right.
What does this have to do with a bachelorette party?
You did that voice with a ring and all I thought of was obnoxious bachelorette parties.
I think of like and Laguna Beach, but
yeah, you were just on one. So anyway, Oklahoma, we'll take a break here and we'll get to Billy Liucci, but Oklahoma football, there's history with Alabama. There's history with Florida. Played in the national title game. Obviously, Oklahoma, Texas will be a thing. Oklahoma, Missouri, and A&M all played in the Big 12. Who do you want to see Oklahoma become like a deeply rooted, hated rival with? Is it Arkansas? Like that doesn't. Who is it?
Oh, that's a really good question. For some reason, my first instinct is Tennessee. I just kind of feel like that's gonna.
There's some history there.
There's a little bit of history there,
Baker Mayfield.
I don't know. That's the first thing that popped to my head. And I haven't really, I didn't know you were going to ask me that question. So I hadn't really fleshed through why, but I do feel like that could be just the passion of both of the fan bases, the history of the programs being elite, and then kind of trying to rise back to where they once were kind of makes sense.
Well, Oklahoma's been like a dominant program for 25 years. So I don't know if I agree with that last part, but
I mean,
I'm with you. I'm with you on all of the other stuff.
This is it's a transitional period, coming to the SEC, no matter what program you are. So they will, although Oklahoma obviously has been historically good and is a very strong program, they still have a little bit of a curve coming back into having a week to week schedule like they will in the SEC.
And we're going to do a lot of scheduling talk, in a couple episodes, maybe next week. But by the way, Erin, you're kind of done for the show. Like that was your one shining moment right there. You show up.
That was my one shining moment.
You put a ring in front of the camera, a national championship ring. I'm sorry. You've got your own montage now.
How dare you steal my reference to one shining moment? I brought this up before the show and you knew that I was going to talk about it. And I have a special place in my heart for the one shining moment video each year because it's kind of part of why I wanted to go into I got super interested in videography is because I freaking love one shining moment every year.
Wow.
One of my favorite things.
That got serious real quickly.
Yeah. And then you freaking stole it after I told you I was going to bring it up.
But you put a national championship ring in front of the camera.
Just so heavy.
So you really got into your profession because of the one shining moment video? After the championship game? By the way, that no children saw because the game ended at 11:30 Eastern time.
Yeah. Hopefully everyone's looking it up today if they didn't see it last night. I will say before I move on, I loved that they did a full dedication to their producer, the CBS producer that was retiring. Yeah. That was pretty awesome because people behind the camera don't get that kind of credit a lot. So that was really cool. one shining moment, as well as seeing my like final nail in the coffin was seeing the SEC storied on Herschel Walker when I found out that he went behind his house and chased the train till he was faster than the train.
That's awesome.
Was like my moment of like realizing what sports can do and kind of, what kind of stories are possible and how many people they can reach. So yeah, that did get kind of serious, but one shining moment in the SEC story with Herschel Walker were like my nails in the coffin for video.
Well, and Herschel Walker's career arc is fascinating.
Well, yeah, we had some ups and downs there.
Yeah,
I'm talking about little 8-year-old Herschel Walker.
No, I know. And the push-ups and the story that
bullying
it's a spectacular story. Unbelievable, like arguably the greatest freshman football player ever in the history of the league. I mean, outside of, I can't even think of any. Bo maybe might be the only one that's comparable. So, it's the backstory there for Herschel is easily root forable. I don't know what the right word is. Root forable. That's obviously the right phrase. All right.
Let's not end before we mention women's basketball.
Okay. So, you want to talk about rivalries?
Yeah, let's talk about rivalries.
You want to talk about rivalries here? True story. Like all the women in my my wife's family circle, all diehard Lady Vols fans, like huge.
Love that.
And we were at a kid's birthday party the other day. One of our, not mine, but one of somebody else's. And I was talking to one of my buddy's moms, who's a friend of mine, and she leans over to me, and this was like during the tournament. She leans over to me and she's like, I'm so glad. I'm so glad they lost. And I was like, who? She was like, South Carolina. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? Like, this was in the middle of the SEC tournament or whatever. And she's like, what are you talking? I was like, what are you talking about? Kentucky and Tennessee are like, they're going to play on Saturday. And she's like, no, South Carolina, the Lady Gamecocks, they got beat. I'm so happy. And I was like, wait a second. So South Carolina has become the Kentucky of women's basketball, which makes total sense because they're a dominant force. Like all credit to South Carolina.
Well, it was UConn.
UConn is by far the number one biggest rivalry. Right. But it kind of struck me because I don't watch a ton of women's basketball, but it struck me that South Carolina has become the thing that Kentucky has always been in men's basketball. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, no, it is interesting.
So congrats, right? Congrats to South Carolina.
Yeah. And I think that I love the fact of like the very powerful, strong, confident female coaching figure. I mean, honestly, like South Carolina and what Dawn's been able to do there is Dawn Stanley is, the current version. You can't compare anyone to Pat Summitt, but she laid the land of what a successful female basketball coach looks like. And she obviously is a legacy in and of herself. And I feel like Dawn Stanley, in terms of what she's pushing for deeper than just winning games, which is what Pat Summitt did, is changing the culture of what women's sports looks like. And I think Dawn Stanley is doing that currently. I'm not saying that's making people hate South Carolina. I just think there's kind of some
I think Tennessee, effect. I think Tennessee people hate South Carolina. Because of what you're talking about, Pat Summitt and the history, and like, no, we are the thing that changed women's basketball in the South, not anybody else, and now somebody else is doing it too.
Yeah,
and I think that hurts. They're so angry at South Carolina. They're so angry at South Carolina women's.
Props
basketball.
To Ray Tanner too for just the support that he's put behind women's athletics and their basketball program, kind of leading the way and giving them the same platform and opportunities, or at least trying to, as men's sports. I think that he really is a good role model for athletic directors across the country in terms of what that's supposed to look like and how people can get excited about women's sports if you just give it a little bit more of a platform closer to what it deserves. So I'm done with rant.
And Ray Tanner, one more College World Series championship ring than Erin Dugan. So there you have it.
I don't think I have an opportunity to catch up now, but
the old okay. Remember Michael Roth? The old Michael Roth pitching. He was the number one starter for South Carolina 2 years in a row, back-to-back national championships, I think, for South Carolina, if I am not mistaken. All right.
I'm not going to fact check you, but I believe you.
I think that just about does it for rivalry weekend here on the podcast. When we come back, a fantastic conversation with Billy Liucci of TexAgs.com about the Texas A&M roster, the defense, the line of scrimmage, the quarterback battle, and the rivalry with LSU. All of that when we come back right here on Fringe Element. Fringe Element is brought to you by
Jaspers, calling everyone to a higher culinary power.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Now I can just see like Deb Paquette, who is the wonderful chef that designed the menu at Jaspers.
Ascending above a crowd. Well, that's like I'm picturing.
I see her with like a harp in one hand and like
a cherub.
Yeah.
Do you think Deb's a cherub?
I just can see her, you're talking about ascending to a higher culinary power. And I just see Deb with like a harp, strumming a harp over here and then like muddling some like orange peel over here with like her hand
and
into something.
She could definitely do both of those things at the same time. No question.
Yeah. So if you're in Nashville and you're coming to town or you live here, make sure you go to Jasper's. The parking is free. The drink specials are amazing. The menu is truly spectacular. And they, of course, are part of the Four Top Hospitality group of restaurants. They have 13 locations across the Southeast. They got stuff in Huntsville and Memphis and Jackson, Mississippi. So make sure you check out all the great restaurants, Char, etc., Etch, Saltine. They got all kinds of great restaurants. Obviously, Jasper's here in Nashville is one of the best places. They got a game room now. We talked about that with shuffleboard and Papa Shot and all that other stuff. Yep. So make sure you check out all that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Nashville has a lot of good steakhouse options. But if you've not been to Char, it can give the other ones a run for their money to try it out. I agree. It's right across from Trader Joe's. So you can just pop in, grab some cookie butter ice cream after, and then just go home.
Well,
I don't think Trader Joe's is going to hear this.
Jaspers has a grab and go market where they have homemade cheesecake that I've purchased.
It was just because of the proximity to Char. It was nothing against Jasper's Desserts. Why do you hate our advertisers so much? I don't. I just basically made a reference between Deb Paquette and a comparison to the Lord, I think, on accident. So I don't think hate would be the right word.
Thou shall not take Deb's name in vain. Okay. All right.
Deb would be so alarmed if she heard like how obsessively we talked about her. She's like, what's happening?
I think Deb is very comfortable being separated from the marketing arm of Four Top Hospitality.
Namely, and by that we mean us.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So go to Jasper's, everybody. The food is great. The parking's free. The happy hours are great. It's a great place to watch games. And there are a bunch of other restaurants from Four Top Hospitality across the Southeast. So wherever you're listening to this, if you're traveling to a game somewhere, baseball this spring, basketball, football, whatever it was, spring games, make sure you check out Four Top Hospitality and Jasper's here in Nashville.
Yep.
Luch, always a pleasure to see you, man. Thank you so much for giving us a few minutes of your time. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Anytime, Braden. How you been, man?
I'm good. I'm good, dude. Before we get into the roster itself, Texas A&M, some of the battles that are taking place, certainly the quarterback situation, the new defensive coordinator, a lot of stuff going on with this program. Can you try to explain to people, though, what Jimbo Fisher is like away from the cameras, off of the air? Like, we know he likes to talk, and we know he's very successful, but just try to give us some insight into who what makes Jimbo Fisher tick away from the cameras.
Family and football and hunting, fishing, outdoor stuff, family, football, and they all kind of tie in together between the family and football and the hunting and fishing. I mean, and I've seen he does some fishing with recruits when they're out at his place. So there's that too. No, I think that would best sum him up. If you talk to him away from the mics and the cameras, and I've gotten to know him really well, really since, the first day he got here, I just felt like we knew each other. And I think that's part of why he's such an elite recruiter. And people lost in the shuffle of all this Lane Kiffin crap, and he won't shut his mouth. He tweeted something yesterday. I really wish A&M would have beaten Ole Miss last year. They could have had a lot more ammo that first year when Ole Miss wasn't any good. That game, COVID canceled it. And then this year, I guess Jimbo's he's 1-1 against Lane, I guess. Or no, maybe 0-1. I forget. It was Lane's second year.
This will be Lane's. He's
0-1
right?
because Lane, they missed the first year. But
right.
Man, you talk about a game that's all of a sudden become big just because of what Kiffin's just sitting there waiting to tweet if Ole Miss could come into Kyle Field and win. So you can bet that A&M fans and the players and coaches are going to want that one. But he won't be quiet about it. But it's funny to me, Braden, because all the guy's ever done is recruit elite classes, including the number 1 class before at Florida State, including the number 4 class at A&M, and in the full cycles that he's had here, I think 4, 6, and 7 in the 3 classes before that. So but you get to know him and you understand why so much of that is, because what he is he's very genuine, whether he's in a great mood, and he's a fiery, competitive dude. When you get him talking about whether it's football, anything outside of it, Jimbo, he's competitive. He's a tough guy. He's got like zero back down to him, but he just loves talking about those things I mentioned. And he can just like he does at a press conference, he can go on and on all day about any of those. Yeah. And talks, as you know, really quickly.
If maybe his offense ran as many plays per minute as his mouth did, that might be the thing that gets A&M over the hump. No, what's fascinating, I was talking to a lot of LSU people it was the same weekend. I think LSU went on the road and got housed by Kentucky. And I think that's the same weekend that A&M beat Alabama. And LSU fans were rooting for Alabama. Like the people I talked to were LSU. And I was like, wait a second, what is there something special about A&M and LSU right now that's turning into one of the conference's more like deeply hated, passionate rivalries? Do you see that?
Based on my mentions, I would say so. Those LSU fans, I called Brian Kelly something the other day. I don't even remember what it was. It was, what did I call him? It wasn't the nicest thing. It was something like, maybe I referred to him. It was something about his video and his dancing. I call him a lot of things. So, but I think that's a good hire. But look, forget about, he's not a fit. He's not a fit. What kind of fit was Nick Saban when they hired him from Michigan State, formerly of like the Cleveland Browns or whatever, So I do think Jimbo's the perfect fit at A&M, though. And I think that's why it was such a big deal to keep him. Look, LSU's tried to hire the guy coaching at A&M 3 times, no matter what their fans say. That's factual. They've tried and failed to hire him 3 times. Maybe Aliva pulled the plug at the very end, but they tried to hire him that year too. And I think if Jimbo would have been saying it's done, I'm coming, that would have happened. A&M's got the coach they wanted. They can talk all they want about Brian Kelly's discipline at practice and the attention to detail, just like every time, OU fans are celebrating Brent Venables and acting like, they didn't lose anything in Lincoln Riley. They spent the last few years coming at me every time I said I didn't think Lincoln Riley was that good. Now they got a guy that's never coached a college game in his career as a head coach, and they think he's the second coming of Bob Stoops. So the LSU A&M thing, Scott Woodward, the Jimbo Fisher element to it, you've got even all the way to women's basketball. They had a girl that played at A&M the year before, and I think it was contentious of whether she was going to be eligible right away. And that thing got messy, as things tend to do with Kim Mulkey. You can go all the way back where not that it's not the highest profile sport, but Pat Henry left LSU for A&M. You had John Chavis, A&M hiring Chavis away. I don't think that many LSU fans were crying about it at the time, but it was still it was a big take.
Yeah.
The 7 overtime game and the Gatorade bath and the knee down. Last year, LSU having a terrible season, and they end up beating A&M on a play that is nearly talked about as controversial as much as it should. Bo Nix, everybody talks about the Tennessee Ole Miss game this year and the fumble that wasn't. How about Damani Richardson ripping the ball away from the LSU return man on the punt return at the end of the game? That should have been it was a no-brainer fumble, no forward progress. No one said a damn thing about it. You can see I'm into the rivalry. Baseball is always heated between those two schools dating back to 1989.
Isn't it also like, I don't want to talk about Katrina, but Katrina displaced a lot of Louisiana people into the greater Houston area. Yeah. And so now you got all these families that are now intertwined. I just think that I-10 thing is something special, man. Like it's developing into something real fun to watch as an outsider. And
Harold Perkins burning the A&M hat at his commitment party on signing day. What is that? Like all the A&M guys, and then there's the bad blood with this recruiting class and the way A&M owned Houston, and LSU's got natural ties in there. Oh, by the way, the Aggies have Max Johnson now. That could get interesting. So the whole thing,
it's awesome.
I love it. People say it's not a rivalry. It is. And it dates back a long time in both football and baseball. It dates back a long time. So I think if these two teams can both get right at the same time, it could be really big. They really haven't played a game yet, Braden, where both of them are really good. Maybe in 2012, but it was before we realized what A&M had with Johnny. It was about right around early, like late in the first half of the season. It was an 11 a.m. game at Kyle Field with Mike Evans, Johnny Manziel, Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, 11 a.m. And nobody was really
Jeremy Hill. And
And so if they could both get right, even the dog, Billy, even the dog does not like LSU. Well, we don't like tigers around here. I actually have some, and this is the other thing you haven't tapped into either. I have so many close friends, not only that cover LSU, but played for LSU. I'm over here trying to get his toy so he'll shut up. This is tremendous poise and concentration on your part. Like, you're still looking at the camera, you're still doing the interview and trying to get the dog situated. It's impressive. It would be even better if I would have fallen out of the chair. But no, like there's so many friendships that go, it's not A&M Texas, it's not Alabama Auburn, but there, like you said, when you talked about I-10 and the Sabine River, there's a hell of a lot of overlap. Yep. All right, so let's get to the team real quickly here, looking ahead. And obviously, we've seen Jimbo Fisher in the past take an extremely talented roster and an unproven but very talented young quarterback to a national championship game. We saw that in 2013 at Florida State. Is it crazy to start talking like that? Is there a quarterback on this roster that is good enough to sort of fulfill some of those similarities? What do you make of the battle? What do fans need to know about the quarterback position for A&M this summer? I think Texas A&M is going to have a great quarterback situation moving forward. You can break it down however you want. Like even after this season, let's say if one of the three leaves, but because how quarterbacks are nowadays, but going into this season with three, with a guy that won the job last year, really going away in Haynes King, a guy that the program loves, with a guy in Max Johnson, who LSU fans are making it like it's no big deal. He threw 27 touchdowns and 6 picks last year behind a terrible offensive line with like his third OC, or I guess second OC in 2 years for him. But the system kept changing without his best receiver. I think Jimbo looked at him and said, I think I can take this guy to a whole nother level. And I think Max and Brad Johnson probably looked at Jimbo and felt the same way. So, and then Conor Wigman, who as a true freshman, 5-star, there's a lot of guys in this class that I would think will have a more immediate impact than Wigman. There are very few in that class, which is, on paper, the best class ever signed. There are very few that I think are as gifted as this kid. I mean, he's an incredibly just instinctive, natural player. Braden, he's running around wearing number 15 on this, not on the scout team. He's getting reps right, but he's wearing number 15. It reminds me of what Johnny was wearing 15 on the scout team back in 2011 when Ryan Tannehill was a quarterback. And he does a lot of those same things. There's also the Patrick Mahomes comparison, which people in that district have made many times. This kid just has that feel of pressure, getting rid of the football, knowing where to go with it in moment's notice. He's pretty special. And I think coming out of spring ball, I think even more so than going in, this is a 3-quarterback race. And meanwhile, Haynes King, all he is a guy that's won the job. He's been in Jimbo's system 3 years and runs a sub 4.5 at 6'3". They've got a unique situation. I think moving forward, it's going to be incredible because whoever starts this year, you should return them the next. I have no idea who's going to win that job, and I wouldn't even name a favorite right now.
Yeah. It's good to have options and certainly some veteran options as well as the young options. Looking at both lines of scrimmage, because this is where Jimbo has made his hay. It's where you have to be good in the SEC. They're replacing some all-world talent on the defensive side in Leal and company. They got some holes on the offensive side as well. I'm not as worried about the skill positions. What do you make of the states of the defensive and offensive lines? Are they good enough to stack up week in, week out and beat teams? And I'm going to say Alabama, Georgia here. I know that's not all the teams on their schedule, but if you're going to compete for a playoff spot, those are the teams you're going to have to beat.
Yeah, get back to me on the D-line. That one's the most fascinating because people forget they return 2 5-stars. We talk about everybody they sign. They returned 2 5-stars and a guy that was right on the cut line that picked them over Alabama in McKinley Jackson. So between McKinley Jackson, Tumishe Adelier, who's been one of the stars of the spring, even going back to bowl practices, and Shamar Turner, who was playing a lot last year before he suffered a high ankle sprain. Those 3 guys coming back, Fadil Diggs, Isaiah Rakes, those are 2 guys that have played a lot and have looked good. And then you have this true freshman class that's as good as anything I've ever seen at any position by anyone. Bama, Georgia, Ohio State. I don't care. Like, I'm sure Bama had some classes where they signed 3 5-star, borderline 5-star backs. A&M signed 4 of the 5 highest rated D linemen in the country. And on top of that, they got another 3 guys that were either a 5-star in one of the 3 major services or were at one point a 5-star. That's 7 of their 8 dudes, let's just say, either were or flirted with 5-star status. This is an unbelievable group, but don't forget, they've got 2 5-stars that, for all intents and purposes, redshirted last year on the D-line that are ready to play. So where that thing starts versus where it could be a month into the season, that could be a special group. And don't forget, as good as that A&M D-line was these last couple of seasons, I think Michael Clemens played his way up into the draft. He might be a 3rd-round pick. Leal, I think 2nd, maybe 3rd. I think he'll go 2nd when it's all said and done. But you had other guys that they're going to fight to get drafted that are coming out of there. So from a talent standpoint, this thing's only going up. Experience matters a hell of a lot in this league. You look at guys like Peavy and Clemens, who were grown men in year 5 and 6, made a big difference. But that is as talented a defensive front as anything in college football right now outside of maybe Athens. And on the O-line, it's interesting. Foster and Fothery, true freshman starters last year that were really good. I think they're both going to be high-round NFL picks. So now they're going into year 2. Layden Robinson's back. But you lost a first-rounder in Kenyon Green, and you're looking for a left tackle. I think that's going to be Trey Zune. There's plenty of options at guard. I love what they've got. There's one question for me on the O-line. And Steve Adazio is a hell of an O-line coach. You know, he had some success as a head coach at BC and Temple, but really the reason he got those jobs is because he's a hell of an O-line coach. And that position really intrigues me. I would, if I were in that room, in that building, I would really have to be sitting there going, do we need to find a tackle in the portal? There are several guys that could play there. You've got 4 true freshmen coming in. A couple of them could play there. I just wonder, you know, are you going to try to go through the season with 2 sure things at tackle, one of whom hadn't played? That's a question mark.
Mike Elko leaves, pretty important piece of this defense the last few years. DJ Durkin did pretty good work at Ole Miss last year, got their numbers improved significantly. What is it going to look like? How different is it going to look? What's the philosophy change that's taking place going from Elko to Durkin?
I think it's going to look pretty similar in terms of scheme. And I think that was a big thing that with Jimbo with the hire, and he went and checked Durkin's background and you know, Kiffin kind of took him to that 3-3-5, and he went and visited, you know, Iowa State, kind of altered his style to fit that Ole Miss personnel. I think this will be more of a comfort zone for Durkin. I think this was something that he and Jimbo talked about a lot before this hire was made, because of everything we just talked about, that D-line personnel. If there's a position on this roster that doesn't have a lot of depth, even after this recruiting class, it's linebacker. They got a potential great one in Edgerrin Cooper and a veteran in Andre White. not much behind that in terms of anything proven. So I think you'll see a lot more of what Elko did. That's why they kept that, and because they're great coaches, Tyler Santucci and Elijah Robinson gave them titles and promotions, and to keep that continuity. So it's the rare thing where you see a defensive coach come in and the entire defensive staff around him stays the same. I think it'll be more, Braden, of a personality thing, whereas I think DJ Durkin's going to be more aggressive probably in his play calling than maybe Elko was, particularly early in games. I'll be interested to see how A&M fares against these up-tempo hurry-ups. You remember 3 drives in, they were down 17-0 to Kendall Briles in Arkansas. Very early in that Ole Miss game, I think they were down 15-0 at halftime, and it could have been a lot worse. Those were games where kind of Mississippi State was similar, where when you get going in that tempo early in games, I felt like Elko was a master of the halftime adjustments, and really, as the game wore on, he would really get after OCs, even in those games, with his play calls and the blitzes and what he disguised. He's a genius. But to start games sometimes, A&M against that particular type of team, which ironically enough is where Durkin's coming from. So I think that could be an area where you hope you would see improvement.
Yeah, they played much better in the second half against Ole Miss. There's no question about that. The defense gave them a chance. All right, we'll leave you with this then. You've been covering this team how long, Billy? How long you been covering A&M football?
Since 19. I mean, if we're not talking about just recruiting and covering the team, 98.
I'm talking
cool 25.
So a quarter of a century of knowledge here. This is the most talented A&M roster since or ever. Where do you think? 1 to 85. Where does this rank up during your time in College Station?
It might be 1. I mean, I go back to when I was in school. So Jackie Sherrill and those teams were right before me. So I came on about early end of RC, not at the very beginning, but the early end. Those teams defensively had as much talent, and they had some, but they didn't have the level of they did it at running back for sure, tight end for sure, but they weren't recruiting the O-line. Then there were some amazing players during that time early on, but they weren't recruiting at the level that A&M is. It's a O-line, quarterback, wide receiver. So across the board, I think defense is pretty similar to then. And I'm talking about early 90s where they could go almost anywhere and get guys. And RC had such an eye for it too, that a lot of times it didn't even matter about the recruiting. You just look at what was on the field and they were like backups that were getting drafted. So at the very least, I would say it's the most talented roster I've seen because of it's kind of the complete across the board. Again, if I have one nitpick, it's linebacker compared to what A&M used to have. But if you're going across the board, this is the most talented roster I've seen at A&M, no question. And more importantly, Braden, right? I talk to scouts that come through here every day that I've known for a long, long time that'll tell me the good, bad, and ugly about A&M. When they stunk, they'd tell me. When other teams were better, they'd tell me. When Baylor and TCU had more talent, they'd tell me. And they'd say, that's a concern. Scouts, assistant GMs, coaches in the NFL, I talk to all of them. And not all of them, but I talk to those type of guys all the time. And you hear more and more from them, more than ever. It went from, you hear them talked about along with OU, Florida, Auburn. Then it was kind of LSU and A&M, I think, kind of cross paths right now. And now you hear A&M talked about with Auburn and Georgia. By the guys,
Bama and Georgia.
I'm sorry, Bama and Georgia. By the guys that make the rounds. And they go in the trenches, they look just like Bama and Georgia on tape. I mean, there's no Jordan Davis, but they're just like, you look at the depth, you go out to practice, you look at the guys they're working with. And there were a couple spots where they needed to get there. And I think receiver in the secondary were 2 of them that with this class coming in, they addressed that. They signed 2 5-star receivers. They've got Aniyah Smith back. They've got depth there. And then in the secondary, this was just now the best secondary class I've seen A&M sign. and I didn't think I'd be saying this, but keep an eye on Denver Harris, because the true freshman corner, I think is going to be hard to keep off the field. And that's a position where A&M returns 2 starters, including a 5-star that's going into year 3. So a lot to work with now, really just about across the board for Jimbo Fisher in this program.
Well, we'll see if it's this year or next year that it all comes together, because it's going to break. It'll break through like Georgia broke through at some point if you keep putting dudes on the field like that. Give the pup a shout out. Let's hear the pup.
I don't know what he's doing out here.
What's his name?
Griffin.
Give Griffin.
Yeah. I don't know what he's doing. It's not after Ken Griffey Jr. It's not after is it Lord? No, it's Harry Potter, Gryffindor, whatever. It's not those. I just named him Griffin because I named my last one Graham, and I just thought something with a GR, and he looks like a Griffin.
All right. Well, shout outs to Griffin the dog. We appreciate Billy. Always a pleasure, man. Tex Ags, you guys do a great job down there. I love talking with you, man. That's your State of the Union for Texas A&M. Luch, thank you so much for your time, man. We appreciate it.
I'm just glad you got to talk to me and not Louie today. All right, Braden. Thank you. About 3 people get that joke. I appreciate it. Yeah, exactly. He'll get it. That's all that matters.
Yes, that's true. Thanks,
all right,
man.
buddy.
That about does it. Billy Liucci, very enlightening stuff there, man. That nobody can cover sort of the ins and outs of Texas A&M like cultural fabric the way Billy Liucci can. And he said it's the best. He said could be the best 1 to 85 roster that Texas A&M has ever had. And if that's the case, we're in for a hell of a season in college football in the SEC. So
be pretty awesome. Yep. You got 3 teams flirting with the top. I know it's hard to put anybody above Alabama or Georgia from what we just saw this past season, but I think Texas A&M is going to be wreaking a little bit of chaos, wreaking havoc.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
They are the wrecking crew, I think, right? Isn't Texas A&M the wrecking crew?
The wrecking crew. I feel like
the rambling wreck is Georgia Tech. I know that.
I'm not sure I know the wrecking crew.
Maybe I'm wrong. Wrecking crew. I thought it was the wrecking crew defense. I'm pretty sure. And I think Liucci was referencing that defense in the mid 90s. I want to say that was Dat Wynn, who ended up playing like an all-time linebacker for Texas A&M. So anyway, this is what happens when you went to middle school in the state of Texas and you have like these weird Texas memories in your head.
Yeah.
That's what happens.
It's not the only weird things in your head, I'm sure.
No, of course not. Just like you have weird Liberty Bowl memories in your head that really nobody should have, but you've got them. So
no one should.
There you have it. Erin, where can people find you?
The Erin Dugan on Twitter, Erin_Dugan on Instagram.
Make sure you check out the YouTube page as well. Make sure you click subscribe on all the buttons, whether it's the social feed, the YouTube page, the podcast app, all that great stuff. Just make sure you're subscribing. If you want to rate and review, that's cool too. You can follow me on Twitter at Braden Gall. Make sure you go to Jasper's as well. Say hi to the Lord and Savior Deb Paquette for us. Thank you guys all for listening. Thanks to Billy Liucci. Thanks to Erin Dugan. My name's Braden Gall. We'll talk to you again next week, folks. This has been Fringe Element on the 440 Sports Network.
God, that's over. My arm hurts.